Today's story is about a ferry trip I'll never forget. It was 1982, and I had to get a brand new 172 from the factory in Wichita, Kansas, all the way back to Nevada. But there was a catch. It was late December. The plane had no radios, no navigation gear, and when I arrived to pick it up, it looked more like a giant plane-shaped popsicle than an aircraft. I was about to cross the Rockies at 13,000 feet, weaving between peaks in a puddle jumper on one of the shortest days of the year. This is that story.
Hi, I'm Jim. In 1982, I was an aircraft salesman with a problem. I had a brand new 172 sitting at the Cessna factory in Wichita, and the owner wanted it home for Nevada now. But when I got to the airport on December 22nd, about the shortest day of the year, that plane looked like a giant plane-shaped popsicle. It was encased in thick ice and it wouldn't melt. To make it worse, the plane had no radios and no navigation gear. I was about to cross the high Rockies at 13,000 feet, weaving between peaks in a puddle jumper, just to get it home. This is the story of that ferry flight. Stick around, it gets a little interesting.
Today's story is about an interesting ferry trip I made, bringing a brand new airplane back from the Cessna factory in Wichita, Kansas. This was right around 1982. I was an aircraft salesman back then, and I'd sold this 172 in early November. Now, usually I'd send a trusted local pilot to pick him up, but the ice storms in the Midwest were so bad that two different pilots had to come back empty-handed. The owner was getting impatient, so I decided to handle it myself. It was December 22nd, nearly the shortest day of the year. I finished some business in Oakland, jumped on an airliner to Wichita, and headed to the factory the next morning. It was all prearranged. The factory hid the keys in the plane, and it was full of fuel. All I had to do was hop in and fly away. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. When I arrived, that airplane looked like a plane-shaped popsicle. It was covered in thick ice from continuous storms, and it was so cold out that the ice just wouldn't melt. I fought with that ice for over an hour, using ropes and whatever tools I could find to scrape the wings clear. This was crucial, because I had planned my flight to reach Carson City during the daylight, and that hour of de-icing put me way behind schedule. The most interesting thing about this plane, it had no avionics, no radios, no navigation equipment. The owner wanted to install a custom package at our shop back home. So here I am, in a little puddle jumper with limited range, trying to cross the Rockies during the shortest days of the year. The quickest route was directly over the mountains, many of which top out at 14,000 feet. My little 172 wasn't capable of flying at a safe altitude above those peaks, so I leveled off at 13,000. When I'd run into a 14,000-foot peak, I'd just steer around it, or weave between the summits, then turn back on course. I had no navigation gear, just a small handheld radio and an aeronautical chart. I'd glance at the map, match the peaks and lakes to the landmarks on the ground, and keep pushing west. By the time I cleared the high Rockies and started my descent toward Milford, Utah, it was well below zero. When I landed, the local crew told me it was dropping to 20 below that night. I asked about a heated hangar, but they were totally full. I knew if I left that plane outside, it would become cold-soaked, making it impossible to start the next morning. They didn't even have engine heaters. So, even though it was approaching darkness, I had them fuel the plane and I took off immediately. I climbed to 10,500 feet, flying into the darkness across Nevada. The ground was covered in white snow and thick ground fog. I couldn't see anything but the silhouettes of the hills. It was VFR, but I was basically flying on instruments. I had to stick perfectly to my planned headings. My last visual checkpoint was the lights of the Manhattan Mine, northeast of Tonopah. When those lights finally showed up through the dark, I knew exactly where I was. I turned to my final heading toward Carson City. Eventually, the lights of Yarrington appeared, and I started my descent. I landed in Carson City exactly 1 hour after dark, somewhat beyond my ETA, but that ice back in Wichita really made me sweat the clock. These little trips get exciting when you're short on daylight and have no radios, but as usual, I made it. And that's my little 172 ferry story.
That was my little 172 Ferry story. Looking back, it's a fond memory, but in the moment, staring at those 14,000-foot peaks with no radios, it was a real lesson in respect for the sky. I want to thank you for coming along for the ride. We just cleared over 5,000 watch hours, and I'm officially applying for the partner program thanks to your support. If you enjoy these Aviation Chronicles, please hit that subscribe button and join the community. And I'd love to hear your own short daylight stories in the comments. I'm Jim, and I'll see you in the next one.